You're listening to and watching the Authentic Influence podcast. My name is Samantha Riley from samanthariley.global, and today I'm taking over the mic and interviewing the host with the most, Anthony Chansamuth. So, Amph, welcome to your own show.
That sounds weird, but thanks for letting me onto my own show, Sam. Love it.
Well, I was a bit worried then when I couldn't see you. I was like, okay, so I'm going to be running the show totally today. So glad that you could join us. I'm really looking forward to interviewing today. I think you've been on my podcast, Influenced by Design, or it was known as Thought Leaders Business Lab. I've interviewed you on the show twice. You've interviewed me on as a mic takeover. So I'm glad that it's the first time I'm showing up on your show, and looking forward to diving in and extracting some genius from you today.
All right, let's do it.
Well, let's start off, because I think I actually don't know a lot about your background. I know you from when you've been in business, but I'd love to know what your career background is. What were you doing before you started your business?
There's a long. I remember I did this for a Twitter thread recently, just to demonstrate a point, which is that where you start in your career is often not where you end up. And I started off, like, my first ever official job was when I was 17. I worked for McDonald's here in Sydney, as a server, and I wasn't good enough to actually be on the grill. Like, they tested me on the grill, and I totally sucked.
No way.
Yeah, totes.
As a Macca's chick, I'm absolutely that's terrible.
I know.
That was my first job too.
And this is why I don't make burgers for my wife. Or anybody, because I want them to live. So, yep. So that was kind of there. But then I started. I got that job the reason I got the job was because I was going into university, and I didn't want to be a burden on my parents. And I said, I'm going to actually work my way through a weekend job, whatever it was, to actually save money and pay off my tuition, which I did. So by the time within 4 years or 3 years of graduating, I actually had paid off my student debt. And so I went from there. I graduated with an IT degree, actually a Bachelor of Business at the University of Western Sydney in what we know as Macarthur, but it's been renamed to Campbelltown. And I came out with a Bachelor of Business Information and Computing Management degree, which is basically a fancy way of saying programming. And then the year I graduated was the year that .com went really well, and then it busted. And so all the IT companies weren't hiring. And if they were hiring, they were requiring that their graduates had at least 5 years of industry experience. And I did not have that. So I struggled for a good 18 months getting my first job.
Wow.
And so I worked, to make money during that time. I worked at American Express. I was taking, full-time in the call center, taking calls, helping people get consumer credit cards, all these kind of things, and then worked my way. Then I finally got into IT, which was with HP, Hewlett Packard. I had a role going for their tech support desk. It wasn't even tech; it was in customer service side. So I went to customer service first, got in there, and then worked in the call center for about 10 months before I went from being a team member to becoming the manager of the team, and I managed a team of 10 staff. 9 of those staff were women. And so I was learning all about how do you deal with all the personalities and the hormones and all these things that go on between a group of women. Seriously, it was like that. And the other guy was this very shy Indian dude. I love him to death, but he just couldn't handle them. And then within 12 months, outsourcing had happened, and what they called globalization at the time. So I had the enviable position of actually having to let go of all my team and then going over to India and training the new team that were replacing them. So a lot of mixed emotions during that period, a lot of alcohol, a lot of really negative behaviors, which it wasn't really until very recently, like a few years ago, when I started to reflect on that time in my life, did I realize how toxic an environment and a culture that was. Because you're dealing with all this pressure, like the Australians and the Kiwis hated picking up the phone and ringing the call centers. The people in India were getting the team members who were, these new, young, fresh-eyed people were getting they're starting their careers. Were getting slammed on the phones by us, us people going, "Why do you speak so weirdly?" And all these, really not so nice things were being said. And I saw it on both ends. I saw what it was like how do you manage?
Yeah, on both sides of that.
But what's going on, right? And so I left. From that role, I became a global project manager for HP for a while, and then it ended up moving to Toronto, Canada. After, in between, what happened was I ended up in hospital because of all the stress and had a brain surgery. So,
Wow.
Yeah, had that happen. So that was my corporate career, and I decided lying in a hospital bed for a month, I just said, you know what, I need to do something better with my life, and need to be in a better environment. And so I stayed around for another year with HP. GFC in 2009 happened, and then they started letting go of all their project managers, and I was one of them. So, and that's when I actually was... I had my first, what you would call a side hustle these days. And so I actually was on the weekend just volunteer teaching salsa. Like I was actually I know you're a dancer and we've had this chat, but I was going out and doing socials on certain nights. And then on Thursday nights, I was at the church teaching as a volunteer salsa instructor. On Sunday, I was helping out as well. And then my roommate at the time, gorgeous Maria, said to me, "Hey Ed, why don't you teach salsa out of our living room just to make an additional side income?" Or
as
something.
you do.
Yeah, and she said, we'll move all the couches and we'll get everything out for we'll do all that, and then you just bring people in, and she's such an entrepreneur of mind. And then I said, okay, let's give that a go. And I said, I found this site called meetup.com, which was still very new back then. It was 2009 when this happened, and I put up this. I named the group Toronto Beginner Salsa or something like this, and within 2 weeks I had 200 registered members. And then the week after that, I set up my first event. Said, come to this place at this time, and I've got my hat out, and you pay whatever you want, and I'll teach you for an hour. I had 5 people show up, and I made like $25 or something. That turned into a weekly thing, and then it led to me teaching salsa at organizations and institutions around Toronto.
Wow.
And some of those students said, "Why don't you come and teach at our office?" I'm like, okay. So that became a thing, right? And whilst I was doing that during the evenings, and making some money to pay rent, I was then during the daytime volunteering for a non-profit, learning all about social media and how to use social media to grow a following, to specifically to attract people to a conference that I was helping them with, which was 4 months away. We needed to fill a venue with 200 people, and they said, "Hey, can you help us do that?" And I'm, me being let's say yes to everything, even though you have no idea what you're doing, and work it out. And that was kind of the mentality, and we made it happen, right? So became that year one of the premier social entrepreneurship events in Canada. And so that's kind of what I was doing before I got back to Sydney, and then started a Facebook ad agency with another guy that I met randomly at an event called Escape Your Day Job. So and we ran that for 2 years. I then got we split up because we were going in different directions in terms of where we were both headed individually, and went through what I now call the divorce. And I think you've been through a business partnership breakup.
Yes.
So what it's much more involved than like I ever anticipated. Literally, you're dealing with your bank accounts, you're dealing with your emotions, you're dealing with this was your best friend for 2 years, and now it's like, and we still love each other. We just didn't anticipate all these things were going to happen, and it really,
it's a lot.
And our relationship took a hit for another 2 or 3 years before we really got back and met up for a drink. Like it was just we needed a space. We needed to process and digest all of that. And then I really was feeling very down after that, Sam. Like I felt, what am I going to do? I totally failed in this business. And I booked a one-way ticket to the US, because this is what you do, right? So you book a one-way ticket to the US to an event called World Domination Summit in 2014 in Portland, and then I'm re-inspired and reinvigorated because I'm surrounded by all these incredible humans that are like Chris Gillibo, who actually runs the event, and you know, and meeting some really awesome people who are doing just you know, amazing things with their creative projects and their businesses, and I'm reinvigorated. The other thing I was testing on during that trip was, would I enjoy the process of coaching if I turned it into an actual business where I was coaching full time, because I'd never done that before. And so one of the personal challenges I set for myself, or objectives during that trip, was I'm just going to coach people as much as I can. If anyone's open to it and they're asking for some help, I'm just going to coach them. I'm not going to charge them. I just want to see what the experience is like, just to give, and be in a place for, you know, of sharing in that way. And I had done up until that point I did my NLP Master Practitioner training. I had done some different coaching courses and whatnot, and so I had like developed those skills through those trainings. But I'd never gone out there and gone, hey, I'm a coach. Do you want to like work with me?
Do you want to work with me? Yeah. Right.
Yeah. And so that was the test. I enjoyed it. But then I hit a week where I had literally like 8 coaching sessions per day. And what I didn't realize was, I can see your reaction.
Yeah, like, exactly. Because 8 a day, that just empties the tank like that fast.
Yeah. And like once you hit your first person and it's a really emotional conversation and you're just like, oh my gosh, like all this stuff's coming up, and it's not even your stuff, it's their stuff. And if you don't have processes to work through that, protect yourself, you know, let go of it in between meeting from one client to the next client. I was spent. Like at the end of the day, I was just like, I'm crashing. I'm out of here. And I cannot do this. And that's when I realized I can't do this as a full-time thing, coaching 6 to 8 clients every single day, every week. Like that's not going to happen. And so, you know, I realized that I'll have to find a better way of doing it. Right.
Yeah, totally.
So then when I came back to Sydney, I was in a situation where, hey, like I had pretty much burned through all my savings when I was in the States, and then thought, okay, what do I do? I need to get a job, but I really wasn't actively looking for a job per se, because part of my mind was still thinking I still need to give this entrepreneur thing a go, because I think that it wasn't a complete failure. There was a lot I had learned in the last few years being in business, and you know, it was more, I still wanted to do something. Long story short, I sent a message to a guy that I knew here in Sydney on Facebook and said, hey man, like he worked at Hub Australia, which is a co-working space here in Sydney and all over the country, and I said, you know, have you guys got any part-time jobs going? Because I was open to part-time income from a job, but not full-time. And he said, you know, we don't actually have anything part-time, but this is one role which I think might be really good for you. And he sent me the job listing, and I had a look at it, and I went, all the skills I've been developing over the last 5 years are sitting on this one page, right? And the kicker was that the community that I'd be working with and for and serving are the community of entrepreneurs, people who invigorate me. Like I'm like, I want to find when I was in the States and surrounded by these people, I'm like, I want to surround myself with more of these people. So I get to Australia and he's literally saying, here's a job, have a look at it. I went to one of the events they hosted the following week, and just felt like this is my place. Like I've got to be hanging out in this place in some capacity.
People.
Yeah, these are my peeps. And so, you know, I applied, and being that I'm not, you know, being that who I am, I'm like, I just don't want to put in a standard cover letter and CV. I've got to do a full-on PowerPoint presentation, and I put together this presentation and recorded a video. This is before Loom existed. I did whatever the tool was. I sent that to them, and the general manager was blown away. And he basically told me after I actually got the job, he said, you know, like you just killed us with that first. The way you applied, because I had given them, these are my core values as a human being, these are your core values as a company, and this is how they align, right?
Wow.
And I've given that in a slide deck, and then the other thing I told them about was how I just done this non-profit charitable work in Laos for a couple of years, and my mission is to help those young kids in Laos learn how to read and do those sort of things. And the reason why I want to work with you guys is, some of that money that I actually want to host a retreat in Laos, and I want to do that in the next 2 years, and I want you to help me get there, right? And so they loved the vision, they loved the values, and they were like, this is the guy, like he can present, he can communicate, and this is what we want for someone who join us in the marketing team. So I got that role and became the national marketing manager for 2 years, and then did not learn from my first experience. I burnt out. Right? Only because there was some restructuring going on in the organization, and what our team of 4 that I started with became a team of 1, which was me. And that's when I actually met Cindy during that stint. And Cindy said, hey, you need to get out of that position. Like, you need to get out of there, and because it's affecting our relationship, it's not. You're just burning out, and she could see it from the outside. That's when I 2015, June 2015, I finally resigned, and within a month of that resignation date, I had my first 3 clients for a done-for-you article writing service that I just tested with a single landing page and a 7-day challenge I was participating in on Facebook, and that led to what's now become Simple Creative Marketing. We're 7 years in now, and it's still going, and it's evolving as a business.
As all businesses do. I love that story. It's so in depth, and I think that the theme or the golden thread that I could pick up with all of that is that every time you lost your mojo for whatever reason, it was always about getting back into surrounding yourself by the right people and allowing that collective energy to help raise you up and give you what you needed to be able to move forward. And I totally understand that, because you're right, when I lost my businesses back in 2010, that's exactly what I did. I came to Sydney, found my people. I mean, that's where we met originally, and went into this community and got that mojo back. And I think that for anyone that's in business that's watching or listening, that if you are losing your mojo, go and find some people that are going to help you refuel, give you some more inspiration, whatever it is.
Absolutely. And can if I just to add to that, something a mentor said to me during that time when I was really down in the dumps and lost my moved on from the first business, like they said to me, whatever you're feeling and you're wanting at this point in time, because I was feeling really down about finances, I was feeling really down about just failure, as an entrepreneur, and what I wanted was abundance. I wanted joy. I wanted great people, inspiring people that lifted me up. And they said, well, go and this was the advice they gave me at the time, was go and be that for other people. And so, get out of your, you have the right to wallow and have those negative emotions and experience them, because we're humans. Just don't stay there and go and seek out opportunity to give. And I actually started doing things like hosting free hug sessions in Bondi Beach and other places around here, but also in both in Canada and the US when I was over there as well, and doing random things just to bring people together and give joy to others, and that led to open a door to opportunities coming my way and really amazing people coming my way. So I wanted to just sort of put that out there as something that I learned during that process.
Yeah, totally. I wanted to ask about your time coming out of the Amex call center. I didn't know that you worked in a call center for 18 months. What, or if any, what did you learn there that you actually use in your business now? Because I know a lot of people that have worked in call centers, and they have, whilst it's not a great job, they have learned some amazing skills that have really helped them in their business. So have you had that same experience?
Absolutely. I think my first vision that came to my head when you asked that question was actually of my team lead at the time, whose name was Dean. And Dean was one of the first, LGBTQ, first gay men that actually the only gay boss I ever had. And one thing I remember from Dean was just his humanity and how kind he was to all his team members. Because we were in a high pressure environment. We were taking 100 calls a day within a 7.5 hour window. And sometimes you get very unhappy customers and clients shouting through the phone at you. And so I remember him just being almost like a motherly spirit around us. And he always, two things was on his sort of agenda for each shift, which was one, help maintain the morale of the team members, and be their inspiration and be a friend as much as you are a boss. So I've definitely taken that on board as I work with my team members and contractors. Like that's something that and partners like yourself. Like for me, it's always that stayed with me. And the second thing is around KPIs and metrics. So Amex are very, they don't become a multi-billion-dollar company without very strong numbers and data and these sort of things. And a call center, I've been in 3 call centers, and they are very strong at resource management. They have an entire team dedicated to scheduling team members in shifts and these sort of things. And when someone's away and someone's calling in sick, or someone's planned leave, whatever, they've got a whole bloody system. 3 people sitting at a desk working it all out, right? And what I saw was just they worked it out. They worked out how much every call or every minute per call is worth to the company.
Wow.
Right? Yeah,
that's detail.
Yeah, and so they would know, right, if we have, X number of staff on the floor, with the projection of these number of calls coming through this in an 8-hour shift, right, they could then resource accordingly, right? And they would know if they were dealing with marketing, and marketing would have put out a new promotion for a new card on the market or whatever the product was. The call centers would get slammed because now you get people calling for the deal, so they would have to staff accordingly, and they would adjust their figures based on all these numbers they had. So that to me was the first time I'd seen that in operation. Like for me, it was like, wow, this is you've gotten it down to science. And so when you're dealing with a business, and I'm your typical creative, I don't love numbers to that degree, even though I support, as you know, I support an accounting firm. And it's something I've learned from Merrill at Bean Ninjas as well. It's like, it's important to get to those numbers. You don't have to be that granular, but if you can understand where your profit margins sit, if you can understand where you have flexibility to move up and down on your pricing, and also in terms of your staffing, because your team members cost you money as well, or they're an investment, then you've got much more ability to do things with the business, tighten the ship if you need to during challenging moments, but also when you have space to expand and invest in things like marketing or whatever it may be, partnerships, you can. And that was a huge insight that I took away from my time in the call center.
Yeah, love it. So you talk a lot about authentic marketing, and I want to know, why is that so important to you? Like, what is it that made you really lean into this?
So the reason why I'm so big on authentic marketing is because I've had the experience of being the buyer of products, services. I've been the consumer. We all start off in that way. Before we become the business owner, running our own businesses, we buy things. And I've always had, and I remember when I started my business, the first business, and I went to networking events, and something never really gelled with me, which is when I met someone for the first time. In that first 30 seconds, they're putting out a business card, right? And it's like, wait a minute, like, we just met. I don't know you, you don't know me. We, yes, we have our ability as humans to pick up on a vibe, and that's all, and body language, and that's powerful. But I just didn't like that way of selling a business or selling a service, right? So for me, it was like, okay, why don't we get to know each other before we jump in bed?
Yeah, pretty much.
And that's kind of, when I think of a lot of marketing, particularly for small business, a lot of it is done to emulate what they see larger businesses are doing. So when we're looking at a Coca-Cola or, you know, an Uber or whatever it may be, and we go, oh, they're putting billboards out there on the freeway when you're driving to the highway, so we should invest $60,000 and do the same thing. And it's like, wait a minute, that's not going to work for you. Like that's, you know, because they're doing radio ads, maybe we should go and do that. Or because we see some brand that we're following has done really well with Facebook ads, and therefore let's jump in the ship and let's spend $2,000 a month on Facebook ads. And I learned this when we were running the Facebook ad agency, right? These companies were trying to invest in Facebook ads, and we would say, well, it's going to cost you, you know, $1,500 for our ad management fee, plus your $2,000 a month for your ad spend, right? And it's going to take us 3 months to work out if this is working or not, right? And no one wanted to hear that, right? They wanted to say, hey, no, we're going to pay you today and you're going to make it work next week, right? And you're going to bring us leads and you're going to get all the ROI. And the problem is that they're buying into a system that they've seen works for larger businesses that don't necessarily work for smaller businesses. And there's many ways, as you know, there's really a gazillion ways that you can market a business.
Yep.
And it's not just the three we normally talk about, which is Google, you know, SEO, organic, and then you've got your run your Facebook ads or your Google ads, and then you might have some BNI and business networking groups and these sort of things. And there's probably that's a handful that everyone does and tries. But the key to making any of that work is how authentic are you in your messaging? Like how honest and transparent and credible do you come across in your communication, right? So whether you show up at a networking function or you do a podcast like this, or you write content, or you pay for an ad, whatever it may be, right? What we as humans have, especially Aussies, we have these great bullshit detectors. And so
we do.
Right? And so we're looking out for that. We're going, that just doesn't seem right. I'm not going to buy that. I'm not going to go book I'm not going to go through your 10-step tripwire funnel and do all these things, when I know straight off the bat, I listened to 3 episodes of Sam coaching someone on her podcast, and I just know she's the coach for me, and I'm just going to send her an email message or give her a call. Let's have a chat and see if we're a fit. That in most B2B services is the case, and I've had the experience where all I've done, Sam, I've just consistently put out a Facebook message, once a day, sharing a tip or whatever it may be, and I literally had someone send me a private message on Facebook saying, I don't know what you're selling, I don't care, I need a coach, and I know it's you. And let's make that happen. What's it going to cost? Let's go. And I've had that happen countless times. And every time I asked them why, what was it about me? They just said, because you've been real. You've just shown up and just been you. You didn't try and sell me into something and give me all the bells and whistles. You just went, okay, what's your problem? How can you solve it?
How can we fix it? Yeah.
Let's go, right? And then you also gave me some kind of guarantee, or if it doesn't work out, you gave me a way out, right? And that's what most of us are looking for. We're not looking for, right? Even though we say we want the Rolls Royce of coaching, which is the Tony Robbins. I've had people who signed up and paid $50,000 a year to work with Tony Robbins. They don't get Tony, they get one of his coaches. No. And I asked them after 6 months of the program, I said, how'd you go? And they said, we've not produced one outcome from that, all this coaching. Right? And it's like, well, you've been sold. like that,
That's a massive marketing and sales machine. Yeah,
right. And so it's and then now I'm seeing all the stuff that him and his partners are doing, and I'm going, oh, that's just questionable, man. I'm like, when you have the reputation and credibility that he has, why would you get into some of these things that they're doing now with network marketing and other things that they're doing? I'm just like, oh my gosh. Anyway, that's another conversation. But back to your question, I think it's anytime I bought from someone, it's been because I felt that they were honest and they were telling me things that possibly were not in their favor. They were honest and just said, you know what, I'm not the best person for you, or I've got 3 packages, but this is probably the one that's going to best fit what you're looking for, right? And they're not always trying to push the higher end one because that's the one that's going to make them the most money, right? But they know, because they're thinking that they're playing the long game. They know if they can get me on a lower package and give me a great service, I'm most likely going to stick around and upgrade anyway. So that's it's just a different perspective and a different approach.
Totally, totally. I love that. So you've really niched into case studies. What was it that made you decide to really drill down and focus on that? Because there's so many people that are really afraid to, you know, fully niche, and I know that you do a lot, but you really are known for, being the person to go to for case studies. So what made you actually make that transition?
Honestly, it was because of the pandemic. So what happened at the beginning of the pandemic? What I noticed was that content agencies were in proliferation. So we were, putting ourselves out there as a content agency. We can do your monthly blog articles. We can do a whole bunch of other things. And I didn't want to be a full stack digital service agency. I didn't want to be that because I didn't have all the pieces to make that work anyway. But I was looking for something more streamlined as a business model. I was looking at something that we could position better. I had read April Dunford's book, which is called Obviously Awesome. Definitely recommend that as a book for anyone who wants to understand positioning and how to do that better. And it made me think. So it made me think. Okay, well, I don't just want to be known as another copywriter because if you put in Australian copywriter in Google, you're going to get millions of results. Even though I am ranking page 1 or page 2 right now for that keyword, but inevitably, what it came down to was I thought about what were we producing for our clients, had already produced in the last 2 years or 3 years, and what is it that actually inspires me about my business? And this is a good question for any entrepreneur to ask themselves at least once a year, right? And so for me, and I thought about it. I said, the way we started, even though we started off with and I mentioned the 7-day challenge and the first 3 clients. The first client wanted me to do a case study for them. They actually said, "Can you interview this person, one of our clients, and just get the story on what they, their business, but also what they thought about our service?" And that client then hired me to do case studies for his business, and I was just reminded of that. I'm like, oh my gosh, like that's how we started. And for me, I was looking at, I was getting a bit tired with the whole copywriting process because copywriting, for someone who's done it for almost hitting a decade now. But for me, I've just gone to the point where I felt I want to be writing for myself and I don't necessarily want to be writing for clients. And I don't want the pressure of, it's got to convert and it's got to do all these things. And because I can't control a lot of what happens after the copy leaves, our writer's hands or my hands. I hand it over to you as a business because you're buying the copy from me. And then it's up to you to do whatever you want with it. But I can't control your funnel. I can't control, how good your ads are. I can't control, all these things that are on the page. If you've got pop-ups coming up and you've got things that distract the reader, I can't control any of that. So it really puts me in this position where I'm like, I don't like that. I don't like that. I can influence the conversion, but I can't control a lot of different elements to it. And so I went, but what I can do, I like interviewing people. This is why I have a podcast. This is why I love being on your podcast and other people's podcasts. I love the process of Q&A and digging into people's stories and motivations. And that's a big part of the case study service, is actually sitting on a call with someone and going for 30 minutes going, tell me all about X, Y, Z. And then the other thing I like is, working with my team. I have someone who writes the article once we finish recording. Then I have someone else who takes the video and chops it up and does all these nice video editing things to it, puts the branding on it. I hate doing that step, but I love that, that our editor does that for us. And then, I love interacting with the client. So for me, that's an ideal service for me. And because there's something I learned from Mero and Bean Ninjas is when you productize a service, you take one service and turn that into the product, it's much more easier to then become known for that product.
100%.
Right? So now it's like people go, you're the case study guy, right?
Yeah.
And that's, that's taken 12 months of getting out there on podcasts and talking about what we do and how to optimize case studies. And it's also forced me to learn all these things. So then when I'm speaking to clients and prospective clients, I'm saying, look, your case study is such a powerful asset because, if you're using it, in your proposals, like when you're at the proposal stage of the sale, if you're using it, in your pitches, when you're pitching, whether it's for investment or you're pitching a service or you're doing it on a webinar or you're doing it on, as a guest on someone else's show, if you can drop in a case study there and talk about a client that you helped get a specific outcome, right? More people are going to go, they're listening and they're going, I want that too. So they want to come along. So it becomes much more than just something you stick up on your website, but it truly, if you do it right, you can repurpose that one case study into multiple pieces of content. I don't know if you've done that. I've seen you do that with, the case studies that we've done for you.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. So that's why we kind of narrowed it in. And I saw the opportunity because in that space, there really is probably one other case study, a business that's known for case studies, and they're in the US, and I know the guy who owns it, and they're much more. They started way before us, so they're kind of like. So I can see how they've evolved, and they've got a good. I'm going to say they're probably around $1 million right now in terms of their revenue, and I can see the path to get there if I wanted to go down that path, right? So that's why I wanted to really narrow in on the case studies. And as sneak peek for our listeners here is I'm working on a new website and a new rebrand, right? And you'll see case studies featured much more prominently on the site when you land on there when it's live.
This makes me super happy because the whole time we were talking about that, I was thinking, why don't you have it on your website a little bit more? Because it is such a big thing of what you do. And you're right. If anyone comes to me and says, hey, like, who do you know about case studies? It's so easy. It's Amp Chansamuth. As opposed to, do you know a copywriter? Well, I know a gazillion. What is it that you're looking for? It's the conversation is just so much easier. So I really love that. But I know we've been chatting for a while, so let's finish up with something that's super fun. I know that you are an avid traveler, as am I. We love traveling. I know that you've been all over the world. What are your 3 favorite places and why?
Number 1 would be Luang Prabang in Laos. So I was born in Laos. My dad actually was. He and his siblings were born in a village which is about 5 hours north of Laos by car, and I went there, had the honor and the pleasure of going there with my wife for the first time. I took her there and met my dad there actually, and it was really a tremendous experience. Now I love Luang Prabang because if you've ever been there, it's the northernmost city in Laos, and it sits at the crossing of 2 rivers, the Mekong River and what's called the Khan River. In Lao, it's pronounced Nam Khan. Nam means water. And so it has been described as one of the most tranquil places in the world. So when you sit, right, in a cafe or in your Airbnb or your hotel, whatever you've got there, and you literally, all you hear is the sound of the water running, right? And it's the pace of that city. It doesn't feel like a city. Like it really feels like you're lost in time. Like you're in the 1940s when the French had occupied and they set up these bakeries, and you can smell the fresh smell of, baked goods coming out from the cafe next door, and you got baguettes everywhere, and it's. Like I've said to Cindy, when I get to the stage where I'm ready to write my memoir, that's where I'm going to do it.
That's where it's going to be.
Yeah, because you just wake up and, most of the villages are up by 6 a.m. while the sun hasn't risen, because once it gets to 8 o'clock, it gets really hot. And so, the markets are happening, it's live, it's motorbikes and dogs and things running up past you. But for the most part, it's one of the most beautiful places. And I met a yoga instructor there one time, and I said to him, how would you describe this? Because he was an American and had come to live and work out of Luang Prabang. And he said, he said the way I describe it is, Luang Prabang is the place to be. It's not a place to do.
Oh.
And so that's number 1 for me. Places. The second place I would say is Montreal, Quebec, which is in Canada. That's my favorite for summer city, summer town. That by far like is my number one. And I shared with my wife Cindy when we were dating, and I said, like I just have, whenever I speak about it, it lights me up. It's because it's the one place that it's a super green city, and it's also one of the best cycling cities in the world. So we've got bike lanes. Like if you try to ride a bike in Sydney,
No, I do. I'm too scared to ride a bike in Sydney.
Exactly right. Okay, so and it's very hilly here, and you don't want to do it. But in Montreal, like, you literally have families. I was riding behind a bike. There was a 4-year-old riding on his bike behind his dad, and it was so cute. And it's just such a beautiful city, and it runs throughout the entire city, right? And then there's parks everywhere. It's a very park vibe city, so everyone's out because it's summertime. They're just chilling. Everyone's having. You can drink beer in the parks, and no one's you're not gonna get in trouble for that. People are smoking weed, like it's people are dancing by the fountain, and it's just a very jovial. It's I don't know if this is a good way to describe it. It's like Paris, right? Because you have French people, but way much more
fun.
chill. Yeah, and fun.
I love Paris, but the people there aren't so much fun.
Yeah, so I've been to both, and yeah, you know what I'm saying. So that's number 2, and number 3. Like, I'm gonna be biased because I live here, but I have to say Sydney. Like for me, it's having gone and travelled around 40 plus countries and things around the world. We have it amazing in Sydney with the harbour, and just you are an hour or 2 hours out of the Blue Mountains. You want to get in there and do your trekking and waterfalls and all these sort of things, and quaint cafes and all these. And then you've got, obviously, if you like the water, you get on the harbour. If you like the beaches, we've got just stunning beaches. And I lived in the Gold Coast for some time, and I can tell you, like, some of the beaches here, are actually better than what's up there. And it's just it's a dynamic city. Like it really is, and it's not as hectic as New York or Saigon. I've been to Ho Chi Minh, and it's crazy busy. But at the same time, it's particularly when it's not raining like it has been for the last month. It's a beautiful place to be.
Yeah. Love it. And I hope you've enjoyed being a guest on your own podcast as much as I've enjoyed interviewing you. Thank you for being such a fabulous guest. And I hope that we've shared some really cool stuff with your listeners.
You've been amazing, Sam. We're going to have to do a part 2, I think, because...
because I didn't even get through half of my questions.
Same with yours. I've got a whole bunch of questions for you still. So, love it. Well, thank you for joining in, everyone. And please check out Sam's, what she's up to over at Samantha Riley. Samantha... I've got it here, SamanthaRiley.global, and you can get onto, join her group too. She's got an amazing group. Did you rename the group, or is it still the same?
I did rename it. Oh, gosh, I can't even remember how long ago, but it's the Coaches, Course Creators and Speakers.
That's right. Okay, so join that group, and if you are a coach, consultant, speaker, rising thought leader, Sam's an amazing coach and works with tremendous clients. And we had the pleasure of interviewing some of her clients, and they all love it to bits as much as I do. So, and also check out Sam's podcast, which has been recently renamed to Influence by Design, on all your favorite podcast shows. Thanks again, Sam.
Thanks, Sam.